Hey, Nico from Deltastring here, deltastring.com, here with Zendesk Quick Win. People keep asking me about macros. How do you make sure that any kind of content that needs to be in a macro is filled out? You might have bits in your macro that say, insert information here, whether that's maybe an order number or you'll get your refund by Thursday or whatever it might be. How can you make that work so that your agents aren't sending macros without having filled in all the bits and pieces that are in there? And it's a good question in a way, but we need to take a step back and look at what the whole process is about. So you presumably, and if not, you should have all your processes mapped out. And so a customer comes in here, they're asking about this, and it's all a decision tree, right? You have a process tree, you have these decision points that say whether the customer goes down this channel or that channel, right? And your macros should exist at the points where it's a decision, and so you have to go down one leg or the other, but a human needs to verify which of those it's going to be. Maybe it's, is a refund authorized here, for example. It's a really common one. And so the role of the macro is not to simply, in an old-fashioned way, be a pre-built chunk of text that they put in, but instead to say, we're on this path. Now, when an agent chooses the macro and says we're on this path, you need to have sufficient data in the ticket form to cover what the actual outcome is at this point in the transaction, right? So maybe it needs to have an order number, maybe it needs to have a value for something, not sure. And it's going to need to pull those things via APIs from maybe your payment provider, maybe it's Stripe, Go Cardless, maybe using Shopify, something like that in this example. And so what instead the macro does is say, right, at decision point this, we're going down path this, which is maybe refund authorized, right? And then the agent chooses that macro. The macro doesn't itself contain information that's emailed or sent, however, to the customer, but instead the macro causes a trigger to run. That trigger checks that the fields are all appropriately filled out. So perhaps the macro changes a field that is refund authorized to yes, or something of that nature. And then your trigger is caused to happen from that. So that change in that field causes a trigger to run. That trigger checks that the ticket form contains the information on the other aspects that it needs to know to fulfill that operation. Sends a webhook to your payment provider, and then based on what returns on that, we get maybe a 200. Then you can take additional operations, and that would be then to send a message, send a notification to the customer that is going to be, hey, your refund's been processed, and and use some liquid templating and the information that you can access via API to make that sound real human. Say, hey, your refund has been authorized. If you don't see it in your bank by Friday, reply to this email and we'll look into it, right? Something of that nature. And all the information in there needs to be pulled from sources. And what I'd recommend as well doing is using some liquid to put some content in there that's maybe changes from message to message based on something randomish, right? So that it sounds a bit more human. Maybe if the order number ends in is an odd number, then you can say one thing, and that sort of nature of process there. Put some liquid into your response to make it sound like it's been written by a human. Have humans construct these responses, right? Send that response via the trigger. Obviously, it'll appear there on the ticket for the agents to see at the at a future decision point or when they need to refer back to it. And then if all the information isn't there in the ticket form, or for some reason maybe the API is inaccessible, then instead a further trigger leaves a note saying so as an internal note on the ticket, puts this ticket back in the queue of things that need to be actioned by an agent, and someone will need to manually look at it. And that's going to happen more at the beginning and less after a while when you find any problems that are coming up, right? And what you'll end up with there is you're going to gradually build out automations for all your processes that exist and reduce how much manual work is needed, and reduce these points where errors can creep in, problems can happen that can undermine your customers' confidence in you. So in order to make sure that you can validate that an agent has filled in any blank spaces they need to fill in on a macro, get that information out of the macro, get that response out of the macro, all those things need to be in fields which are on the ticket form. All of those things need to be checked by a trigger. If it's not filled out, put it back in the queue for things the agents need to work. If it's all completed, update that ticket using a trigger. Have some randomness in there to make that response a bit more human, and build out your whole process tree in triggers And what the macros do is they say at this decision point, we've gone down this leg. And you'll end up with a process that builds itself, automates itself over time, and your agents can focus on providing value, providing better use cases, helping your customers get the best out of the product rather than doing things that should be done by software, right? So I'm Nico at Deltastring, and that is how you do Zendesk properly in 2025.